Hello again and welcome to Unit 3. In this video, I'm going to spend a real brief time talking about the content from the chapter and focus more time talking about the discussion board questions. Because I feel like historically that is where there's been the most confusion in this section. So just to kind of give you a heads up there. Regarding the chapter itself, this is really the start of kind of a history lesson of where social welfare kind of sprung from and how it looked and developed in different cultures and societies over time. So one of the things that you need to think about as you're approaching this chapter is think about what systems came into existence at what point that we have seen evolve and develop that still exist in modern times, right? In the first video in chapter 1, we talked about Judeo-Christian religion being one of the underlying factors for social work and social welfare as it exists today, apart from what your personal belief system is. Okay, I'm speaking of this again historically, not saying that you have to identify with a particular religion to enter the social work profession. I don't mean that at all, but know that it is a large underlying theme that has evolved and influenced social work as it exists today. Okay, and that's really what chapter 3 is all about, is trying to understand historically what has molded the system and how we interact with individuals and how we view others as well. There's a great kind of summary paragraph in the conclusion of chapter 3 that I just want to focus on. Within your book, it says on page 80, the history of social welfare is also a history of societies and cannot be considered apart from them. Jewish, Greek, Roman, barbarian, and Christian societies reified gender and class stratification, even though the religions ostensibly relieved oppression. Within each, social welfare took on a new meaning with new times. In Judaism, social justice and human need were the keynotes, providing institutional perspective that underlies some aspects of our social welfare today. Greek society developed ideals of both democracy and philanthropy, although the meanings of those ideals were far different in those times than today. Roman society, a blending of many trends from their past, gives political structures and processes that continue to affect our legal and social systems. Christian altruism, as taught by Jesus, is still part of social welfare today. In the following centuries, patriarchal church leaders continued patterns of oppression as well as aid. The Holy Roman Empire became a religio-political system of diverse kingdoms under the spiritual leadership of Rome. A spiral of power between kings and church ensured the success of Christianity in the Western world and the success of royal lineages in the many kingdoms of feudal Europe. So that is, I really like that paragraph because that is a super great summary of how those varied systems across history have put roots down that are still impacting the way that our society functions today, and how we respond regarding our approach to social welfare, those who exist within the system as well. So so great summary paragraph. I just wanted to draw your attention to that, and to kind of help just set the tone for the reading for chapter 3. Now, regarding the discussion board, this is less covered in the text and requires a little bit more outside the text reading and consideration. But I just want to focus on the question posed by the discussion board. So in Unit 3, we said to review the NASW Code of Ethics, and we asked, how will you manage your own personal values while maintaining the Code of Ethics? What are ways in which a social worker can avoid imposing their own personal values on their clients? How are dominant American values like the Protestant work ethic or patriarchy seen in the debate over current social welfare programs? And what gaps exist in your own understanding of oppression and difference? So there is a lot to kind of unpack there. This is always a really interesting read for me, the Unit 3 discussion boards. The main thing that I wanted to focus on is that NASW Code of Ethics. So this is a great time for you to to go back and dive into the code of ethics if you have not done so before. It's a pretty short read, but it is so very crucial. It amazes me sometimes how many folks make it kind of deep into the social work program and don't have a good understanding of the NASW code of ethics, because it really underlines all the work that we do as a profession. Okay, it gives us a kind of a moral compass and a practical guide when we're working with individuals. When we like approach kind of those gray areas, this helps us set the standard of here's how you should be approaching those situations. And then it also says definitively, these are our values as a profession. And if you don't align with those values, then you need to consider really early on if it's worth going further into the profession. Because as a social worker, you commit to the NASW code of ethics and commit to the ideas contained within the code of ethics. Okay, so I want to briefly look at what some of those mean. So in the NASW code of ethics, I'm going to look at a couple of the values and then the ethical principles tied to those. So there are 6 values that are identified in the preamble, and then those each kind of have an ethical principle tied to those. So the first is service, is the value, and the ethical principle is that social workers' primary goal is to help people in need and to address social problems. So service is the value, and in practice, what that means is we're going out and we are identifying those who are in need, and we are assisting those individuals to have a better quality of life. The second is social justice. So social workers challenge social injustice. Okay, so social work is both micro in practice, so one-on-one, meso in those small settings, small groups, small systems, and then macro, we're talking about the larger systems. Okay, and so when we're talking about injustice, we're often talking about larger kinds of injustices. They can be small as well, but there are big systems at play that are affecting individuals. And so our work needs to not only exist at the individual level, but also at the macro level, where we're making systematic changes to assist those in need. So we're always working to help individuals overcome social injustice. The next value is the dignity and worth of the person, and the principles that social workers respect the inherent dignity and worth of the person. So this basically states that every person has value inherently. They don't have to earn value. They do not have to prove value. Everyone has value. Definitively, everyone has value. And as such, you need to treat individuals with that same respect that is inherently deserved. Okay, and in law, it states that individuals are free and equal. Okay, but also within law, there are policies and procedures that are in place that still oppress individuals. And as social workers, we have to rise above those injustices and treat everyone as truly equal. Okay, and then when we notice those differences in law and policy and procedure, that we fight to overcome those and help individuals to overcome those. The next value is the importance of human relationships, and the ethical principles that social workers recognize the central importance of human relationships. And so really that's what it comes down to, right? Social work, social welfare is all about the people. And we value our interactions with one another. And we know that only through the effort of kind of wrapping your arms around somebody are we going to really make a difference. And so you need to value the human connection, okay? The next value is integrity and the ethical principles that social workers behave in a trustworthy manner. So integrity can encapsulate a lot of things, anything from the profession's mission, values, ethical principles, ethical standards. It basically says in a very summative form that integrity is to be a consummate professional, okay, to hold yourself to high standards, and to hold the profession to high standards as well. And then the other value is competence, with the ethical principle being that social workers practice within their areas of competence and develop and enhance their professional expertise. So what this means is that if you don't have a strong competence, let's say working with the LGBTQ community, that you don't pose yourself as an expert of assisting those who are struggling with their sexual identities, for one example. But it also states that that doesn't excuse you from doing better as a professional. And so when you notice that you have that gap, that you need to seek out opportunities to develop as a professional. Okay, so so only operate within your areas of competence, and when you identify that you have a lack of competence within the profession, that you actively seek to amend that by working towards learning and growing. Okay, and so going back to the discussion board question, there is one that is always really interesting embedded within there. It says, what are ways in which a social worker can avoid imposing their own personal values on their clients? Undoubtedly, one of the most common responses I get every semester is that students just will say that they will hide their values, they will push them aside, and they'll put the clients first. And so it sounds really kind of altruistic at first, and it makes it sound like you are this really kind of pious person that is able to do that. But in reality, like, everyone has their values that are making impacts on how we are interacting with individuals on a daily basis, right? And so you get into a real kind of sticky point when you start to try to smother or hide your personal value system. So what you need to do is you need to first be aware of what your personal values are. You need to kind of introspect and think about what your value system is. And then you need to think about how that might impact your work with individuals. And then if you have certain values that are in conflict, you need to think about ways to navigate kind of a middle ground. Okay, so let me give one example that I have ran across within our community, which I think is amazing. So when I was going through my clinical internship, one of the places that I was at Catholic Charities. And so within Catholic Charities, their funding comes from the Catholic Diocese. And so it's a private organization, privately funded. The individuals who come in for services pay out of pocket. And so and they have other fee scales and stuff as well. That's kind of beside the point. But what it equates to is the fact that they have flexibility in terms of how they deliver their services. Now, within Catholic Charities, one of the things that they offer is family counseling, individual counseling, and so those positions are filled by licensed clinical social workers. Okay, so now, because there can be a conflict between what the Catholic religion states are values of the religion and of the faith, and then in response, social workers have their own kind of value system as well. There can be conflicts, right? So, like, one of those could be regarding abortion, for example. So, so as a social worker, you know, if you are against abortion, then you need to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a place where that is going to be something that you have to constantly navigate, right? So if you are in a public health setting and someone wants to talk to you about abortion as an option, then you have to discuss that as an option, right? You can't withhold information from someone if you are in a setting that would not allow you to do so. Okay, so if that's a value, think about the system. So maybe somewhere like the Catholic Charities could be a place where you could operate. So if someone came in there and they were struggling with this thought, then they would not discuss abortion as an option. And because they're a private entity, they had that ability. But there has to be that middle ground for them, right? And so what they did talk about often is they did a lot of counseling for folks who maybe went through and carried out and had an abortion. They would discuss with them kind of those long-term impacts as well. Okay, so so you have to think about that in terms of not finding ways to push your values aside, but you need to be aware of your values. You need to step into them, and then you think about when you enter the profession, you need to think about what opportunities exist for you to allow your personal values and your professional values to work together, right? If you intentionally put yourself in a position where your personal values are being rubbed up against on a daily basis, you're not going to stick it out for very long. There's going to be a lot of burnout, and you're not going to last, right? So you need to think about that. The answer is not smothering values; it's awareness of values and being intentional about where you work and put those values in place. Because at the end of the day, you still have to report back to the social work as a profession and hold up those standards as well. Okay, so just think about that as you approach the discussion board for week 3. This is a great kind of reflective exercise to get you guys thinking about work kind of beyond this class. So, all right, folks, I'm going to leave the in the video here, wrap it up. But I appreciate you guys watching. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out. Thanks.